Welcome to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey from vision to reality. I'm Kelly Jackson, your guide on this path of self-discovery, transformation, and intentional living. Here, we explore everything from mindset shifts and personal growth to spiritual alignment and entrepreneurship, sharing insights, stories, and actionable wisdom to help you live a life in harmony with your dreams. Every episode will dig into what it means to not only dream big, but to actually consciously create the life you envision. Let's turn your dreams into real life. Shadow work gets a mysterious rep, like it is this deep, dark, secretive part of healing. In reality, it is one of the most liberating, clarifying, and creatively expansive journeys that you can take. Your shadow is not here to punish you. It is here to return you to your wholeness. And it's not about diving into pain and getting stuck in the past. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that you abandoned along the way. And in today's episode, we're getting real and playful about shadow work. We're going to explore its roots, who it's for, and when. And then how to recognize your shadows and what happens when we try to avoid this process altogether. Plus, I'm going to show or share how shadow work connects to my art, which I'm excited about, and coaching work as well, I guess, through Mis Sombres. If you have ever asked, why do I keep doing this thing that I don't want to do? This episode is for you, okay? So before we talk about how shadow work shows up in your daily life, let's talk about where it came from, okay? Shadow work didn't just pop up with new age TikTok. It has roots in depth psychology, indigenous healing traditions, and the very human experience of duality. So from Jungian theory to ancient deities, the concept of embracing your dark side has always existed. And spoiler alert, it was never meant to be scary, okay? In this segment, starting off, we are going to be honoring the origins of shadow work and demystifying what it really is so you can feel empowered to engage with it in your own way. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, he coined the term shadow to describe the unconscious parts of ourselves that we push away, the traits, the desires, the impulses that we have deemed unacceptable, embarrassing, or wrong. Okay, maybe you learned that being angry made you bad, or being ambitious made you selfish, or something like that, right? So you buried those feelings. But here's the thing, they didn't disappear. They just moved underground. And Jung believed that integrating these shadow parts is what leads to individuation and becoming your whole self. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is the real magic of shadow work. It's reclaiming your power by meeting your unexamined patterns. Long before Jung, many spiritual systems already knew that the dark was sacred. In Hinduism, the goddess Kali represents destruction, but not for punishment, but to clear the way for rebirth. In Egyptian mythology, they have a goddess Sekhmet. She had the power to both destroy and to heal. And these dark goddesses weren't feared, they were honored. And the idea that we have to only embody light or goodness is a Western distortion. In truth, wholeness has always included both the light and the shadow. And these archetypes show us that chaos and rage and grief and transformation are all part of the divine power and not something to run from. So what is shadow work really? Okay, shadow work is the process of meeting the parts of yourself that you have exiled, hidden, denied. And it's not about fixing or fighting your shadow. It's about learning from it. When you're triggered by somebody, that is a chance to look at what is unhealed inside of you. When you sabotage something good, that's your shadow showing up, asking to be understood. Shadow work is about turning toward your discomfort with compassion and saying, okay, I see you. What are you trying to teach me? It's not a one-time event. It's a lifelong relationship of curiosity and self-honesty. Okay, what are shadow aspects? Your shadow aspects are the behaviors or emotional patterns that you have either suppressed or over-identified with, often without realizing it. Think perfectionism, jealousy, avoidance, control, people-pleasing, shame, comparison. Okay? These aren't flaws. They are protective adaptations. For example, if you were praised for being easy as a child, you might have suppressed your anger or needs. And as an adult, that can show up as passive-aggressive behavior or chronic resentment. And shadow work helps you to trace these patterns back to their origin and ask, what was this trying to protect me from? When you get the answer, you can thank your shadow and choose a new path. Mise en place is kind of my art as a mirror. And the whole mise en place project is such a beautiful embodiment of shadow work in real time. When we give our shadows form through art, writing, voice, movement. We shift from fear to integration. You're not pushing away the shadow, you're dancing with it. And each piece you create becomes a portal for someone else to recognize their own humanity. And that's what makes this process sacred. Creative expression doesn't just process emotion, it honors it. And when you create from your shadows, you don't just heal yourself, you are offering this medicine to others too. Okay? That's why this Mis Hombres really is dear to my heart. And there are times I'm being called to focus on it. And there are times I'm being called to have a little space with it. And I honor whatever season I'm in. Again, I'm dancing with it. And it's such a mirror in my life, and it's fun and exciting. And I'm going to say this. When we talk about shadow work, we are not talking about something dark and spooky. We are talking about the process of becoming whole. It is ancient. It is powerful. And it's yours to explore at your own pace. Whether you're writing poetry, yelling in your car, simply noticing what triggers you, you're already in the dance, okay? The question is, are you willing to stay long enough to hear what your shadow wants to say? This is fun. It's fun for me, at least, okay? And I hope it's fun for you, or you will get to that place. And it's one of the ideas behind Mis Hombres was that as these beings came to life, like, I realized that they are whimsical and they're approachable and they're fun. And that's how they're meant to be. Because shadow work can be the same. Okay, so who is shadow work for and who it isn't for? Okay, shadow work, I would say, is often framed as a necessary step on the healing path, and for many it is, but that doesn't mean that it is for everyone at every stage. Okay, so let's look at who shadow work serves best and what signs show that you might be ready for it, and why there is no shame if it is not your season for this work. Okay, so think of this as your permission slip to trust your own timing. Shadow work does not require that you have it all figured out. In fact, it thrives on honesty, not perfection. It is for those who are willing to be vulnerable enough to say, there is more to me than I've been showing. And if you can approach yourself with curiosity instead of criticism, you're already equipped for this work. Courage looks like telling the truth, and especially to yourself. Okay, so shadow work is for the courageous, not the perfect. And shadow work is also not always the first step. If you are in survival mode, like newly out of trauma or navigating something that is destabilizing, jumping into shadow work might feel too intense. And that's okay. Sometimes we need safety before we can explore discomfort. In my coaching work, I will always encourage clients to build nervous system regulation first. And once your body feels safe enough to feel, then your shadow can speak clearly. And this is why emotional safety and support are foundational to deeper healing work. You don't have to go deep all at once. Shadow work isn't always a grand revelation. It can begin with a small moment of self-awareness, like noticing that you're judging someone online and asking, what does this stir up in me? Or catching yourself in a loop of over-apologizing and wondering, when did I learn to shrink? These micro moments build your capacity to do the deeper work later. Shadow work doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be true. Okay? And how can you know then if shadow work is calling you? Because maybe you're cycling through the same self-sabotaging patterns, or you're frustrated by your reactions, but you can't quite explain them. And maybe you've done the work, but you still feel stuck. And that's your shadow knocking. It's saying there is something underneath this that needs your attention. And the call to shadow work doesn't always come as a whisper. It can be a breakdown, a heartbreak, or a breakthrough. So listen in, okay? You can't do it wrong if you do it with love. There's no formula for shadow work. It is not something that you conquer. It is something that you collaborate with. And if you show up with honesty and curiosity and compassion, well, that is the work. Whether you are journaling or reflecting or creating or just noticing, you're in the process. And there's no rush. And there's no finish line. There is just your truth and the relationship that you build with it over time. Okay? Shadow work isn't a badge of honor or a spiritual flex. It is this deeply personal and sacred invitation to see yourself more clearly. And you don't have to answer the call before you are ready. If you feel the pull, you will know. And when you do, the tools, teachers, and opportunities will appear. That's the magic of alignment. It meets you where you are. Okay? So, what happens when we ignore our shadows? We live in this world that teaches us to curate, to control, to suppress anything that feels messy. But the cost of that is disconnection from ourselves, from each other, from the truth. And I want to explore what happens when we ignore or bypass our shadows, and why facing them is one of the kindest things that we can do for ourselves and the world around us. Because shadows don't disappear. They leak. You cannot outrun your shadow. If you don't face it, it shows up in sideways ways in the things that you criticize in others, in the partners you keep attracting, in the dreams you sabotage. Ignoring your shadow doesn't protect you from pain. It just hides the source of it. Shadow work turns the light on. It's how we reclaim our agency and stop living in emotional autopilot. When we don't own our shadows, we tend to see them in other people. That coworker who is so arrogant, well, maybe they're just confident in a way that you were never allowed to be. And that influencer who triggers you, maybe they represent a part of you that is longing to be seen. Projection isn't bad. It is just information. It is a mirror saying, what are you avoiding in yourself? When you have learned to label certain parts of yourself as wrong or ugly, they don't just disappear. They hide in the dark and they grow heavy with shame. And that shame often leads to numbing, to overcompensating, or to self-sabotage. But when you meet those parts with compassion instead of judgment, shame loosens its grip and you stop asking, what is wrong with me? And you start asking, what do I need? Okay, what do I need? What do I need? Shame off me. That's a good mantra. If you are feeling what's wrong with me and you're heavy with shame, use the mantra, shame off me, and start asking yourself, what do I need? Without judgment, with compassion. You want to say, what do I need? What do I need? Shame off me. What do I need? And yeah, that's a good direction. Your next level, whether in love, leadership, or abundance, requires more of you. Not more effort. Relax, not more effort, but more authenticity. If half of you is locked away, you will constantly feel split. Like one foot is on the gas and the other is on the brake. Shadow work clears the blocks so that you can expand without fear. Integration isn't just healing, it is empowerment. And when we refuse to acknowledge certain parts of ourselves, we lose access to our full expression. We shrink, we over-explain, we second guess. Denial might feel safe, but it is not freeing. Shadow work brings you back to yourself, not as a performance, but as like a homecoming. And it says, all of you is worthy to love, even the messy parts. Say that. All of me is worthy of love, even the messy parts. Okay? Avoiding your shadow may feel easier in the moment. I get it. But it is a form of self-abandonment. And eventually it costs more energy to suppress it than to meet it. Shadow work isn't about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before you learned to hide. That's the version of you that's waiting to be seen. So, what's the point of doing shadow work? Why dig into the parts of ourselves that feel uncomfortable or even painful? The answer is simple. Because your power lives there. The parts that you have pushed away hold energy, insight, truth, and even joy. Shadow work isn't about becoming darker. It's about becoming more whole. I want to talk about what makes this work so impactful, how it upgrades your life from the inside out, and why befriending your shadow might be the most loving thing that you ever do. Okay? First things first, suppressing your shadow takes effort, emotional, physical, mental. You don't even realize how draining it is until you stop doing it. Every time you hide a part of yourself, you are splitting your energy. But when you integrate that part, your system stops fighting itself, and suddenly you have more capacity, more clarity, more energy for what you do want to create. And it's finally like getting access to a part of your hard drive that has been running quietly in the background, slowing everything else down. So, shadow work builds empathy, not just for yourself, but for others too. When you have sat with your own jealousy, shame, judgment, you stop demonizing it in others. You see people as layered and nuanced, human. And you can say, yeah, I've been there too, without needing to fix or to save or scold them. And that compassion becomes a powerful foundation for your relationships and your leadership and your purpose. You become less reactive and more responsive. That's emotional maturity, and it's magnetic. So many of the patterns that keep us stuck, like overworking, avoiding intimacy, numbing out, these are rooted in unresolved shadows. When you make time to explore what those behaviors are protecting, you can begin to shift them. You stop reacting from old wounds and start responding from conscious choice. This is where the real change happens. Not from trying harder, but from understanding yourself more deeply. Okay? Shadow work strengthens your intuition. Why? Because the more of yourself you are willing to see, the more clearly you can hear your own inner voice. You're going to stop outsourcing your truth to other people's opinions, and you stop filtering yourself to be palatable. You develop a deep knowing that says, I can handle what I feel, and I trust myself to face whatever comes up. And that trust doesn't just change your inner world, it transforms every decision that you make. And you're going to open new portals of creativity and joy. This is the part people don't talk about enough. Shadow work isn't all heavy. It can actually be fun. When you stop resisting parts of yourself, you open up to a fuller range of expression, and your creativity flows, and your laughter feels real, and your ideas come through uncensored. You start playing more, and you start taking bolder risks and speaking your truth with less hesitation. And joy becomes safer to feel because you're no longer afraid of the contrast that comes with it. You don't do shadow work to fix yourself. You do it to free yourself. The gifts that live in your shadow, your passion, your power, clarity, courage, are awaiting for your attention. And when you choose to face the parts of you that you once ran from, you don't just heal your past, you unlock your future. And the ripple effect of that is limitless. Limitless. So, what does integration actually look like? Because at this point, surely you're like, yes, I want to integrate my shadow. Heck yeah, that sounds like what I want to do, right? Maybe, hey, maybe not for you today in this moment. That's fine. Planting the seeds, letting you know what integration looks like, okay? Because shadow work isn't just about having those big emotional breakthroughs or journaling your way through tough feelings. It is about the integration. And that means taking what you've uncovered and weaving it back into your everyday life. Integration is how shadow work becomes embodied and sustainable and transformative. So let's talk about what integration looks like in real time, like in your relationships, your decisions, your inner dialogue, and even, again, your joy. Because doing the work isn't just the moment of awareness. It is in how you move afterwards. So integration looks like pausing before reacting. Before integration, your triggers run the show. And after integration begins, you start to pause. Maybe you still feel the irritation, the panic, the urge to shut down, but you notice it instead of becoming it. And that pause is gold. It's your nervous system saying, oh, we have a choice now. And with that choice, you respond from consciousness instead of reacting from wounding. You see how the growth is happening? This one shift can change the entire trajectory of your relationships and your inner peace. Integration also looks like owning the parts that you used to hide. So where you once apologized for being too much or shrunk yourself to be light, now you show up fully. Not in defiance, but in integrity. You stop hiding your intensity and your softness and your needs and your desires. You say, this is part of me and I'm learning to love it. And that ownership doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you authentic. And that authenticity radiates out and it gives others permission to do the same. And integration also looks like not needing everyone to understand. You no longer crave validation from people who don't have the capacity to meet you. You stop over-explaining your growth, and you realize that not everyone will get your journey, and that's okay. Integration means trusting your path even when others don't approve or understand. And you begin to feel safe inside yourself instead of needing approval from outside. Integration looks like joy without guilt. And this one surprises a lot of people. When you have carried shame for so long, happiness can feel suspicious. But once you've done shadow work, you start allowing yourself to feel joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm laughing because I remember this one testimony I got one time from someone who said that when they first met me, they thought something must be wrong because, like, how could someone be that happy? It was suspicious to them. And then they went on to say that as they got to know me over time and started doing this work, with me and whatnot, that they realized that, oh no, that's just who I am. But it felt very suspicious in the beginning. So look, It just made me giggle when I thought about it. So what I was saying, but when you've carried shame for a long time, but once you've done the shadow work and you start allowing yourself to feel joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop, you stop sabotaging good things. And you realize that you don't have to earn rest or hustle for love or struggle to deserve ease. That is integration, when pleasure feels safe and joy is allowed to stay. Integration also looks like living your truth, even when it's hard. You're no longer living for someone else's version of success or trying to meet someone else's expectations. You make decisions that feel aligned, even when they're scary. And you set boundaries and you speak your truth and you take risks that reflect your soul, not your conditioning. And yeah, sometimes people don't like it, okay? But your nervous system is grounded enough now to handle that discomfort. You know who you are, and that changes everything. You know, when you stop people pleasing, some people aren't pleased, and you are okay with that now. Integration is the bridge between insight and embodiment. And it's what happens when you stop just knowing better and you start living better. It is not always loud or glamorous. Okay, sometimes it is just choosing yourself again and again and again and again in quiet, daily ways. But over time, guys, these small acts of alignment build a life that feels true. And that is the real magic of shadow work. And that being said, what happens if we don't do shadow work? I want to talk about the part most people avoid, which is what happens if we don't do shadow work. And not from a place of fear or shame, definitely not from a place of fear or shame, rather from a place of awareness and truth. The truth is, you don't have to do the work to be lovable or worthy, okay? But if you are yearning for peace, for clarity, for wholeness, the shadow won't stay buried forever, and it shows up in whispers at first, then louder patterns, and eventually becomes the very thing blocking what you desire. So this segment will explore what it looks like when we don't face the hidden parts and what's available when we finally do. When we avoid shadow work, we project instead of connect. Old wounds get replayed on new people, and you might find yourself blaming your partner, your boss, or your friend for something deeper you've never named. Maybe it's control, maybe it's abandonment, maybe it's a fear of being seen. Whatever it is, it starts to shape the way that you relate to others, often in ways that you can't see clearly until there is a pattern that you cannot ignore. The people in your life become mirrors for what you have buried. And if you don't want to look inward, you will keep repeating the same lessons with different faces. When we suppress certain aspects of ourselves, anger, jealousy, neediness, even ambition, okay, we don't get rid of them. We push them into the unconscious. But from that place, they can start to rot into shame. And you start to believe you are bad instead of realizing you're human. And shadow work helps you separate who you are from what you've experienced or suppressed. Without it, shame can silently erode your self-worth, even if everything looks good on the outside. Okay? If life kind of feels off and you can't explain why, like you're doing all the right things, but it still doesn't feel aligned, you might have the job, the relationship, the home, and it still feels like something is missing. That's often a clue that the shadow is calling. When we bypass the parts of ourselves that need love and integration, life can feel flat or confusing. You might say, well, I should feel happy, but something deeper is asking for attention. Shadow work does not fix your life, okay? It makes your life make sense, though. And I like it for that reason. Unexamined triggers don't dissolve on their own. They dig in deeper. Without shadow work, every difficult interaction can become overwhelming. And you will find yourself exhausted by conflict or devastated by feedback or unable to move past the smallest slight. That's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system is stuck on high alert and it's defending an old wound that never got to heal. And doing the work teaches your system safety and rewrites your patterns. And without it, you stay at the mercy of what you refuse to explore. Okay? In other words, the triggers can intensify and control you if you don't do it. And you'll stay in loops wondering why you're stuck. Have you ever found yourself saying that? Like, why does this keep happening? That is the loop of unexamined shadow. Whether it's attracting unavailable partners, self-sabotaging your success, constantly people-pleasing, unintegrated shadows keep pulling you back into the same experience. And it's not that you are failing. It is that your subconscious is repeating what feels familiar. And without shadow work, those loops can become your norm. Okay? With shadow work, you gain awareness, and awareness creates new choice. Yippee! Who doesn't love options? Again, this isn't about fear, all right? You're not doomed if you haven't done shadow work. Trust me. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You're doing great. But the cost of avoiding your shadows is often paid in confusion or frustration and unfulfilling patterns. So when you choose to face what's hidden, you stop running from yourself. And in that brave return, there is liberation, and there is power, and there is peace. And that is what's waiting. Okay? So, one last thought for you. Shadow work does not always arrive neatly or on schedule. It does not. More often than not, it shows up during what feels like a breakdown or a breakthrough, and it can find you in heartbreak, in burnout, in grief, or in a moment when everything you thought you wanted suddenly doesn't feel right anymore. And sometimes you don't go looking for shadow work, it finds you. And this segment is about those moments and the moments when life cracks you open just enough for something new to come in, if you're willing. You wake up and you realize that who you've been doesn't quite fit anymore. And you don't know who you are without the role, the relationship, the coping mechanism. And this identity crisis is fertile ground for shadow work because the masks are cracking and the shoulds are losing power. And you don't need to have all the answers, but this is a moment to start asking better questions. Okay? Maybe it's the third time you've had the same fight with a different person, or the 50th time you've ignored your own needs and ended up resentful. Patterns repeat until the wisdom is integrated. When the same pain keeps resurfacing, it's not because you're failing, it's because your shadow is trying to speak. If you listen, you can turn that pain into power. If you ignore it, it tends to grow louder until you can't ignore it. So here's an idea. Your external life looks fine, but you feel disconnected. Okay? This is one of the most disorienting signs. Everything on paper looks good, but your inner world feels off. Shadow work often begins when you stop settling for appearances and start seeking truth. You begin to question what success really means. You want more depth, more connection, more you. And that's when the shadow shows up, because you're finally ready to reclaim the parts of you that you left behind to look fine. Okay? This one is sneaky too, okay? When the people around you start triggering you more, when you are on the edge of deeper healing, the world around you starts acting like a mirror factory, and everyone becomes a reflection of something unhealed, and it's frustrating, but it's also a gift. What irritates or hurts you in others is often a call inward, and shadow work invites you to take your power back by no longer making your pain everyone else's fault. And sometimes the shadow doesn't knock, okay? It whispers, a gentle tug toward books you've never used to read, a longing for more meaningful conversations, a desire to be alone and figure it all out. You know, you can't explain it, but you know something is shifting. That's the moment you're being invited into a more intimate relationship with your inner world. You don't need a map, and you don't need to figure it all out, okay? You just need the willingness to explore, all right? Shadow work doesn't have to be dramatic or catastrophic. It can begin in the quiet. It can bloom in curiosity. You don't need to be ready. You just need to be willing to explore what you have denied, willing to meet yourself without judgment, willing to reclaim your wholeness. Because when shadow work finds you, it's never to shame you, it's to liberate you. Shadow work isn't about fixing what's broken. It is about finding what's been buried. As you move through life, you gather stories. Some of them are true. Some of them were told about you, and you believed them. Shadow work is the invitation to sort through these stories with gentleness, humor, and love, and decide what you're ready to release and what you're ready to reclaim. Because you are not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not too messy or too far gone. You are complex, layered, luminous, and human. And this journey of integration isn't linear, and it doesn't have to be lonely. In fact, it's one of the most powerful things I've ever done is to allow myself to be witnessed in the process. And that's why my coaching containers, that's what they're about as well, being lovingly held in the spaces where you're learning to hold yourself. This is the work we do inside Self-Love Uni and in my private coaching, and you are welcome there. You can apply. The details are down below. If this episode resonated with you, I also invite you to explore Mise Sombres, which is my original artwork and writing series born from my own shadow work journey. These are the pieces, the world that poured out of me as I met the parts of myself I used to hide. I hope they help you feel seen too. You do not have to figure it all out today. You just have to stay open and stay curious and stay in conversation with your wholeness. And remember that your shadow is not the enemy. It is your invitation home. That's what I got for you today, guys. With much love always. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It. I hope today's episode sparked something powerful within you. Remember, every step you take towards your vision counts, no matter how small. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a second to hit that subscribe button or leave a review. That would be amazing. Or share the podcast with someone who's ready to bring their dreams into reality too. And if you're looking to dive deeper, connect with me on social media at Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, or at BE_what you want. Or visit dreameditthenreallifedit.us for more resources on aligning your life, business, and dreams. Until next time, keep dreaming and keep manifesting your dreams into real life. Love you, friends.